what I'm going to talk about today is, and Monica asked me to talk about sleep hygiene because it's one of those things that is applicable to everyone. We really want to, whether you have narcolepsy, any sort of hypersomnia issues, insomnia, you're a champion sleeper, whatever it might be, sleep hygiene is really the thing that helps to, everyone loves to use the word optimize nowadays, but it's really the thing that helps to optimize your sleep and get the best out of it. And when it comes to narcolepsy, sleep hygiene is important, but as we know, it's not always the entire picture. It's not usually going to fix a lot of the issues that we see with sleep hygiene or with narcolepsy. But what I'm going to do is talk about sleep hygiene in general for most of us or for all of us, because sleep hygiene is the thing that even if you don't have narcolepsy, it's something you should be doing. And whether you're a caretaker, whether you're a family member, we're all really trying to optimize our sleep because it optimizes how we feel and how we function during the day. So here's the info on where to find me. I do a lot of insomnia work. I work with patients with narcolepsy a lot.
Dr.
Hello?
Harris, I'm sorry, we can't see your slides. We can only see you.
You can only see me. You can't see the slides. Oh, it's because you know why? I didn't share the screen. That makes sense, right? I did the slideshow, but there we go. Is that better?
There it is. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Double buttons I have to put. Okay, now I can see myself. Now it's less. Okay, good. I can see all the screen. So, and I'll leave a lot of room for questions at the end to go from there. But yeah, I also do on Instagram, I do a lot of evidence-based info about just sleep in general, insomnia. I do a lot of work with insomnia. And every Wednesday I have an Ask Me Anything series where you can put a question into a question box. So if something doesn't come up today, there's plenty of ways where you can reach out to me and ask a question, or I can direct you in the right way if you need. So one of my favorite quotes that was said by Alan Rechtschaffen, who is one of the people who he really came up with the way that we score sleep studies to this day. And it's, if sleep does not serve an absolutely vital function, then it's the biggest mistake in the evolutionary process has ever made. So sleep's important. And we have ideas as to why it's important, but we can't come up with a really good, succinct statement for it. I always just say it's kind of the bedrock with which everything else is built upon. Now, when we talk about sleep myths, this is something I always like, because even for people who aren't putting sleep at the top of their list to really be thinking about or focusing on, I really think there's some myths that we need to kind of clear up for anybody and everyone. So one is that if you get an hour less sleep each night than you typically need, it won't affect your daytime functioning. We actually know that that's actually completely not true. So we see decrements in motor abilities. We see issues with attention, concentration. People have mood issues even after one night of a little bit of less sleep. The body easily adjusts to changes in sleep schedules. So two of the best ways to depict this or to really understand this are, one, jet lag. Right? Our bodies are not meant to travel the world in just a matter of a few hours. And our body's natural rhythms get really thrown off when we do have jet lag and travel. And then the other way that we see it too is like coming up in a few weeks, at least here in most states still in the US, so there's the time change. So people start to find that when we lose an hour in the spring, it tends to be harder for a lot of people. But when we see in the winter or the fall is when we get that extra hour, the people who tend to suffer the most are parents who have little kids. So anyone who has a little kid knows that just throwing off that sleep-wake schedule, that consistency can really make a big difference. Sleep is a quiet time for the body and brain when the brain shuts down and rests. I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's not true at all. And we sleep a lot less when we get older. And if you or anyone else is starting to get a lot less sleep as you start to hit middle age, perimenopause, menopause, you start noticing that you're having a lot less sleep than you had before, you are the expert on you. And if something is off from how it was before, then we need to really think about how are we going to address that and not just assume that it's due to aging. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, you make it happen a lot faster if you really don't allow yourself to sleep at all. So let's see, next slide. Here we go. So what is quote unquote normal sleep? So this is something, if you have had A sleep study yourself, if you had an in-lab study, usually for narcolepsy, that's what we're doing. But if you've had an in-lab study, you usually will see this kind of a chart on here, and it's called a hypnogram. And what a hypnogram is it charts out very nicely the stages of sleep that you go through throughout the night. And for someone who does not have narcolepsy, someone who is a quote unquote healthy sleeper, that we tend to cycle through a full sleep cycle about 4 to 7 times a night, depending on how long you sleep for. And what happens in a sleep cycle is you fall asleep, you kind of are awake right off the bat, and then you kind of fall asleep and you're in and out a little bit. So sometimes you're not sure if you fully were asleep, you're kind of in and out. That's stage 1. Then you have stage 2 briefly, and that's kind of the middle stage of sleep. And then stage 3, which is that deep level of sleep. And then you have more time in deep sleep. Then you have a little bit of REM sleep, then a quick awakening. Then you go through it all again. Deep, light, REM, awaken, deep, light, REM, awaken. What we see happen for a more typical sleepers, we see that the stages of deep sleep happen more pronounced in the beginning of the night, the first third of the night, which is why for some people, if an alarm or noise goes off an hour into falling asleep, it's really kind of jarring and startling for some people because your brain is in that deeper stage of sleep. And then as the night goes on, you spend more time in REM sleep, and you can dream in any stage of sleep, but we tend to have the most dreaming in the last third of the night when you have more REM sleep. So some people will notice that they have more dream content, the more dreams that they remember that last third of the night. And that's often because you have more time that you spent in REM sleep that last third of the night. Now, for someone who has narcolepsy, what we typically see is there's less of that deep sleep. And that's what some of the medications can do, is help to deepen the sleep at night. And we see more of REM sleep. So that's why sometimes we'll talk about hypnagogic, hypnopompic hallucinations. We talk about more vivid dreams. We talk about people when they're taking naps during the day, sometimes they'll have more REM sleep during that time and more dream recall. And that's because there's a higher percentage of REM intrusions, REM in general, for people who have narcolepsy. And that's why one of the treatment targets for some of the medications is to try and deepen the sleep so it doesn't feel like it's all REM and very like active sleep throughout the night. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people will use the term REM and say, well, and I see this online all the time. It's like, I got to get that deep, deep REM sleep. That's not true. Deep sleep is that stage 3 that I was talking about. That kind of happens more in the beginning of the night. REM sleep is the exact opposite of deep sleep. REM sleep is super active sleep. Your brain is processing, you're making memories, it helps with emotion regulation. REM sleep is really crucial for that stuff. And that's why you tend to be dreaming more during that stage, having more imagery. So it's a very active time for the brain when the brain is not completely shut off. So REM sleep is quite possibly the complete opposite of that deep sleep that people talk about. All right. Now, there's a reason why I'm talking about this, because I do think that sleep hygiene in of itself is kind of like boring rules, and not everyone wants to follow it. But I think if you understand a little bit of the science behind sleep, so like sleep staging and this 2-factor model, I think it helps to it gives people more perspective in where the sleep hygiene rules come from and why it's meant to help with your biology. So the 2-factor model here, and I love this slide, is really about, there's 2 different processes that are going on that help to keep us awake and asleep, especially with the sleep at night. One is this idea of a sleep drive. And I talk about this a lot. It's almost like a hunger, an appetite for sleep. So if you look at this person, 9 a.m., they just woke up, maybe woke up a few hours ago, they've slept a whole night. So essentially they've had a meal of sleep. So ideally, for someone who has good quality sleepers, an okay sleeper overall, you wake up in the morning, you've had a full meal of sleep, or at least somewhat of a meal of sleep. So you're not so hungry, you don't have an appetite built up. And then as the day goes on, the sleep drive, that appetite in your body starts to build up. You get more and more hungry for sleep as time goes on. And then once night comes, guess what? It's time to eat. So now you eat a whole meal of sleep. And guess what? Same thing, rinse and repeat for the next day. And that's why, and I'll talk about naps a little bit later, but that's why we try to be very specific in our timing of naps, the length of time, also with the sleep staging. And I'll talk about that later with naps as well, because it's always this fine balance of, we want to help with someone, for example, someone who might have narcolepsy and has to use napping as one of their strategies. We're thinking about how will it help with their energy level overall, but also not impact too much nighttime sleep. And this is the same thing for people with insomnia. We have to think about the amount of time that's ideal for people, and it really can be very personalized. Now, the other part of the 2-factor model that can build in here is this circadian alerting signal. So this is the circadian rhythm that so many people like to talk about now. So circa means about, dian, a day, circadian. So it's a rhythm that's naturally built into the cells in our body. That is a clock. It's a timekeeper, essentially. And what this does is melatonin is very low when you wake up in the morning. And melatonin is that hormone of darkness. So it's the thing that needs darkness to start working. And what melatonin does is it makes our brain start to think that sleep is coming. So if you look at the circadian alerting signal, this person's had their circadian natural rhythm is keeping them awake in the morning and during the day. And if you notice around 3 p.m., there's a little dip. So I'm catching a lot of you, if you're on the East Coast time, that post-lunch dip time that can be extra sleepy for some people. And then kind of have a natural awakening. And then about 2 hours before you naturally go to sleep, melatonin, which is naturally made in your brain's pineal gland, starts to come out. And what the melatonin does is it helps to set your body's natural bedtime, wake time rhythm. So melatonin comes out, you have an appetite, now you're hungry for sleep. Those two things work together to keep you asleep throughout the night. You might have awakenings, but ideally not too many awakenings. And then a few hours before you get up, melatonin stops and you start waking up naturally. So sleep duration recommendations. And again, these are general recommendations for most people. I love this graph or this table because it shows that there's a range of sleep timing for everybody, right? It's like, I had a colleague, I can't remember who it was, who said that sleep duration from person to person is like shoe size in the population. Everyone has different shoe sizes, but we kind of range around the same area, right? So when we look at sleep for, let's say, an adult, it's typically, if you look at that kind of darker blue box, 7 to 9 hours for most people. So where we get that 8 from, where you hear that all the time, is just because it's in the middle. It's just easier to report. That's it. So 7 to 9 is the ideal for majority of people, but there are some people that are okay with 6. Some people need a little bit more. They need closer to 10. So it shows that there is a range. And what does need mean? It's where you wake up and you feel well rested and refreshed to go about your day. That's for someone, let's say, who does not have any sort of hypersomnia issues, right? But for someone, if you're a caretaker, if you're someone who, if you are generally just concerned about your sleep because you might not be getting enough, or you might not be optimizing your sleep, this is the guideline that you want to go by. So maybe 6 is enough. Like sometimes people will just start medicating themselves to get to a certain number because they heard that you have to get 8. But if you're fine with 6.5 and you feel good and you don't have any issues, then you're just medicating to get to a certain number. And in my opinion, I don't really understand why we're doing that when the medication, if you're using it for, say, insomnia, or just to get to a certain number, might not be ideal for you. So all issues with poor sleep and poor sleep quality and quantity, and reasons why you want to think about treating your sleep issues, not ignoring them, doing the best you can. I'm not going to go through all this. We all know that sleep is really important. It's like that bedrock for which things kind of build upon. And I talk about this because I'm a psychologist by training. I talk about it all the time, that I think what often gets lost in treatment for any kind of anxiety, depression, mood issues is people don't always really think about the sleep issues that factor in. And what we find, and over again in research, is if someone's got better sleep and they're just sleeping more solid throughout the night, and they feel like their sleep is more restorative and they have a way to manage their sleep, it really does help to improve psychiatric outcomes. And we find that if that piece is missing in any sort of therapy, medication management, then it makes it's more of an uphill battle. So I really try to stress to people to work on your sleep almost as a carve out. Even if you're in therapy, elsewhere for anxiety, depression issues, you're taking medication, but the sleep hasn't gotten better, don't ignore it. Definitely work on the sleep. So just a few other things, sleep and diet and exercise. So we all know that when we're not sleeping as well, what do we tend to do? We tend to crave more higher fat, higher sugar foods. So if we can work on sleep as a target, it can help with hunger signals. It can help with those cravings as well. Now, it's never going to be a perfect solution to all sleep. If you sleep well, you're not going to ever crave any sugar and fat and whatever. But we do find that if you are much more sleep deprived, these are things because your body's trying to get energy as fast as possible. Mood, like I was just talking about. So we need to really think about it as a treatment target, and also memory. So we often want to focus on sleep because sleep is really helpful for memory consolidation and emotion consolidation. And there's been some studies looking at a lack of sleep, especially a significant lack of deeper sleep, potentially putting some people at a higher risk for any memory issues. And that's newer research, but it's definitely something to say, okay, like there's something here, we need to be focusing on it. And even if you don't have a chronic insomnia issue or a chronic, or any sort of a chronic medical issue, apnea, narcolepsy, whatever it might be, you want to try and get the best quality sleep you can as often as possible. So like I keep saying over and over again, don't ignore it. Do what you can. So one other way, and this is not for narcolepsy patients or anyone with idiopathic or any sort of hypersomnia issues. If you are someone who's here, who's just interested in sleep hygiene in general and just total sleep time, one way to tell, like I said, not for people who have hypersomnia issues, if you're sleep deprived is if you fall asleep within 5 minutes routinely. So if you're someone or you have a significant other who's falling asleep really, really fast, that's possible that they are sleep deprived. If you always need an alarm clock to wake up, again, not for people who have hypersomnia issues who have been diagnosed. So if you always need an alarm clock to wake up, that can be another thing. I always say to people, sometimes they judge how they slept at night based on how they woke up right away. If you're still sleepy about a half hour later, after you get up, you might have some issue with sleep quality, sleep quantity, something like that. But if you're feeling better after about 20, 30 minutes, you're good to go. Sometimes it's not this immediate, like hop out of bed and I'm all set to go kind of feeling. And then you have multiple instances of sleepiness, dozing during the day. So we know with people who have any sort of hypersomnia issues, these can be issues, but we also can see this with some people. When you say sleep deprived, it's not always that you're not getting enough sleep. It could be the quality of your sleep is off. So these are all signs that something might be off. Sleep apnea, not getting enough sleep, hypersomnia issues, so many things. Teeth grinding, restless legs, periodic leg movement issues. There can be a lot of things that can get in the way that make the quality of your sleep also problematic. And then, like I talked about, what's your ideal sleep need? So this is another one that's hard to do for a lot of people, but there's two ways you could really do it. So the one way that we always talked about, if you're someone who's just typically an okay sleeper, but you don't really know what your number is to take a week off, which I know it's not always ideal for a lot of people to do, but you take a week off and then you just track, and I'll show you a sleep diary in a minute. You track on the sleep diary your bedtime and your wake time in general, and like what time you naturally are going to bed, and then this goes against what I normally say, don't set an alarm in the morning. And after about days 4 to 7, you're going to pay back some of that sleep debt from initial if you have not been getting enough sleep, and you average together days 4 to 7. And if you feel okay on that amount of sleep, that's probably your number. So don't really take the first few days, but average the nights for 4 to 7 together. And then also one other way to do it is you just kind of start with what you're doing now as consistently as possible. So say you're someone who's going to bed every night at 11 and you wake up at 6 and you're not sure if 7 hours is enough, then maybe you try a few nights at 10:45 to 6 or 11 to 6:15. You can extend it a little in the morning, although sometimes that's harder for some people to do. And then if that's still good and you're still sleeping well, then maybe, you know what, go to bed about 15 minutes earlier again. So now 10:30 to 6. And you kind of just keep extending the window slowly until you feel like it starts to kind of fall apart. Then you got a little greedy and now you have to restrict it a little bit more so you know what your sleep need is there. So what is sleep hygiene? So let's talk about that. So I always say, like I said at the beginning, sleep hygiene is always a really good place to start. One of my colleagues, Rachel Manber, she does a lot of work in the insomnia field. She's a giant in the field. She said years ago, and it stuck with me forever. She said, sleep hygiene is like dental hygiene. So when you want to have practice good dental hygiene, what do? We brush and we floss every single day, multiple times a day. And that is what helps to prevent a cavity or a severe dental problem from happening. But what happens if you do get a cavity? You can still brush and floss routinely and still get a cavity. You can still have these things happen. But if you get a cavity, it's not like you're going to stop brushing and flossing until you get it fixed. You're going to keep doing that unless you have like significant pain on that tooth or something. But you're going to keep brushing and keep flossing while you wait to get the tooth fixed, right? So it's not going to make a cavity go away, but you're going to still keep that basis. So that's how we like to think about sleep hygiene when it comes to sleep issues. So it's a good place to start for everyone. I do find sometimes people get a little too obsessive with sleep hygiene rules though, and it can take hours. And if they don't have it ruled, like lined up in certain orders, then they won't be able to sleep. That's when you want to like be a little bit more fluid with sleep hygiene. But there are things that you want to do routinely as often as possible to help get that better quality sleep that you would hopefully be able to get routinely. Now, if you start having a significant issue with your sleep, whether it be sleep apnea, hypersomnia issues, insomnia, especially because sleep hygiene gets touted as like the treatment that I'll go through for insomnia. It's not going to necessarily fix a lot of those sleep disorders when sleep disorders happen. But you might need to now get a PAP or work on an oral appliance or have a medication option, or we need to rely more heavily on napping strategies, things that kind of go against what we would normally do for proper sleep hygiene. So you still want to do as best sleep hygiene as you can, but you might have to change and add in more treatments as well. And that's usually the way we see it when there's an actual sleep disorder that's on top that's happened, but you still want to have that baseline of good sleep hygiene. So what's the first thing? I always am a fan of people just getting some more insight into their sleep, because what feels totally random isn't always totally random to a lot of people. So now I've been practicing sleep medicine, behavioral sleep medicine for over 20 years now. And when I started doing this, when I was working with like Michael Thorpe at Montefiore, we had an old school, like big sleep diary that we always used. And I've kind of changed it a little bit over the years, but I'm still pretty old school that I really like to just track on a piece of paper. If you want to, and I'll show you a copy of my sleep diary in a minute. If you want to use something like an activity tracker, like where I am in New York, a lot of people like Oura Rings, the Whoop is really popular. Fitbit's not as great. But the thing with the trackers is they're excellent for, some are better than others, but most of them are pretty good for tracking total sleep time and like any awakenings in the middle of the night. So they're good at giving you an idea as to how broken your sleep is, or how long it might take you to fall asleep, or how long you're awake for in the middle of the night. Or they might help to show you, okay, your sleep is more broken when you've had alcohol, you've had certain things like caffeine too late at night, or too much activity and movement. They'll help show you some of those patterns. But I caution to not put all your weight into any of the sleep staging stuff from the trackers. Some are better than others. They are definitely getting better month by month. But I have some patients that I've worked with who will say, well, my tracker says I don't get any REM sleep, or it says I don't get any deep sleep. Take that with a grain of salt. So they're not great, but they're much better for just approximating how much sleep you're getting and how broken your sleep is. So that's my one caveat if you're going to use that. But I love a good old fashioned sleep diary. So here's the sleep diary that I use. It cut off the middle part for some reason on my slide. But if you look at the left side, or you can't really see left versus right, I'll show you in a minute, but it has the date, any unusual stressors, because let's be real, stress can definitely impact people's sleep. There's a lot of stress going on in the world, and it can definitely impact some people more than others. Then naps, time, and length. I think that's really important to just get a baseline. Are you napping? How long are you napping for? Maybe where are you napping, and what time of day are you napping? Any exercise, okay, time, date, day, time of day, how long, what type of exercise? Is it more strength training? Was it more like yoga? Was it aerobic? What was it that you're doing? caffeine, time you're having it, the amount, and any cigarettes, smoking, anything like that, sleep medicine or alcohol. And then what you do after that is there should be like a double line, vertical. Then you just go to bed. You don't look at the sleep diary at all in the middle of the night. The point of a sleep diary is not to make you lose sleep over filling it out. So the right side, you get up in the morning and you just kind of guesstimate. So what time do I think I went to bed and turned out the lights last night? How long did it take me to fall asleep? How many times did I wake up in the middle of the night? How long was I awake in the middle of the night? What time, and this guesstimate, like I said, and then time I finally woke up, and then time I got out of bed. So we want to see, is there a difference between the amount of time you're awake versus getting out? Are you getting out within 20 minutes? How long do you lie there in the morning before you get up? And so I usually have people fill this out for a good week, ideally even 2 weeks. So you can start to see if there are any patterns in your sleep. Are you really inconsistent with your bedtime, wake time? Are you having more alcohol than you thought you did? Are there nights where you slept worse after not napping or taking too long of a nap? So you might start to see some patterns there where you want to start like really focusing your efforts more. So one of the things that I am a big fan of for most of the people that I talk with and work with is, first of all, just kind of trying to know your chronotype. So chronotype is this popular term. We've used it in sleep medicine for years, but it's this thing that's going around. People love to talk about it more and more on social media now. And all chronotype really is what your body's circadian rhythm, your body's clock, what its preferred sleep timing is. And a lot of times, like I have written here, it's biologically driven. So if you had, I hear it time and time again, I have patients who had family members who were night owls and they're a night owl themselves. Sometimes the early bird. There's all different, there's no one chronotype, believe it or not, that's better than another. I am a fan of, if your sleep schedule works, you're getting enough sleep, maybe the quality of it's not ideal, maybe you're working on that with your sleep medicine physician, but your timing of it is fine and it works in your life, then there's no point in trying to change it unless it's not working in your life. You have to get to class early. You have school issues, you have work issues, you have childcare issues, right? Like sometimes I have patients that were night owls for years and then they have a baby. And what happens? They've got to get up with that toddler when that baby starts waking up early in the morning. So sometimes we have to work to change it. But what goes into changing your chronotype we sometimes use tiny doses of melatonin, but we time it very different than you might take it right before bed. We might use bright light therapy. We might have people stay up a lot later every few hours every day until their body clock comes back around. So it's a lot of work that goes into it. If you just say, I want to be in a more normal sleep schedule, think about what that is for you. And if it's worth the effort to put into it, if it is, then great. By all means, I'm here to help however we need. But sometimes people are just fighting against their chronotype because someone told them you should be going to bed before midnight. And if you don't need to go to bed before midnight and you sleep fine on a delayed schedule, then it's fine. It's totally fine. And like I said, if you can lean into your chronotype a little bit, it just lessens that frustration. And one other thing to keep in mind too is that just because you might have a bed partner or someone you're in a relationship with and you sleep in the same room as that person, doesn't mean that you automatically have like a contract signed that you have the same chronotype. So you might have a different chronotype than a significant other. And if you try to match to theirs by either going to bed too early or going to bed too late, sometimes that can worsen your sleep quality. So sometimes there has to be discussion about either meeting in the middle somewhere or keeping your own sleep-wake schedule separate, sleep in the same bed if you want to, but trying not to force it on someone else because sometimes that just makes it even worse. So consistency, right? Remember how I was talking about that circadian rhythm at the beginning, that circadian pattern that really is like melatonin's low in the morning, at night before we go to bed, about 2 hours before, we have the melatonin start to come out because ideally the sun is ideally going down and our brain starts to kind of shut itself down quietly to go to bed. So what are ways to keep that circadian rhythm in check? The two best ways to keep your circadian rhythm check are consistency with your sleep-wake timing. So going to bed at around the same time and getting up at around the same time, 7 days a week, right? 7 days a week. We don't have an alarm clock that says weekend versus weekday that's built into our body, right? We try to fake out our bodies a lot of times with alarms, sleeping in on the weekends. But consistency, there was just a whole consensus paper that came out by, I believe it's the National Sleep Foundation, that was maybe like just a few weeks ago, that said that consistency in sleep-wake timing is like the most important thing. And if you've had a rough week, you can sleep in, but try not to sleep more than an hour and a half, max 2 hours later on the weekend, because that throws off the timing again. So consistency of your bedtime, wake times. And then the other big thing is light exposure. So melatonin is that thing that really does help to guide our sleep-wake timing. And melatonin thrives on dim light. It needs it to start coming out. So dim lights in the evening, dimming those lights about an hour, 2 hours before bed. It's not sitting in darkness. That's the other thing, is like people get very kind of almost obsessive about sitting in the dark to, let their melatonin come in. I find that sometimes that just makes you, I don't know, it's just more, you start resenting going to bed at night. So dim lights are fine. You can use, there's blue light blocking glasses. Those, the research on them is kind of mixed. Some people really love them. But, and I have a screen later too about the screens and what you can do with them. And then also just morning bright light. So especially because we're going to have the time change soon. So for most of us, it's going to be darker at night. And then we're going to start to slowly over the winter, start having more and more darkness in the morning. So you want light during the day, early afternoon, early evening, and you really want light in the morning. Bright light in the morning really helps to stop that melatonin production, set that circadian rhythm, and help with the next night's bedtime. So consistency, and then dim light before bed, bright light in the morning. Sounds super easy. It's hard for many of us to do all the time. Just work on consistency as often as you can. All right, so manipulating body temperature. So this is another big area that I think that people don't always think about so much when it comes to sleep-wake timing. Body temperature is really interesting one, because when you think about that circadian rhythm, what helps melatonin come out as well 2 hours before is that our body temperature actually is dropping just a tiny bit if you're an overall okay sleeper. So it's dropping just a little bit. And then when you wake up in the morning, your body temperature actually starts to warm up. And there are a few things that you can do to actually help mimic this body temperature drop, or if you're someone who might have some trouble with falling asleep or staying asleep. So one simple thing, it's not a solution for everyone, but it's a really simple thing to try, is to sleep with socks on. So we call this passive body heating. So I keep my bedroom pretty chilly. I keep it at about 68 degrees every night. My family loves it. I tend to, though, have freezing feet when I go to bed at night. So I wear warm, fuzzy socks. And when I do that, what it does, it helps to let the heat escape through your feet, and you're cooling down your core body temperature to help allow for more of that melatonin production and keep you asleep throughout the night. Another thing that can be done is a bath, or a hot shower or a hot bath. So about an hour and a half before bed. Some people, there have not been a ton of studies on it, but there were a lot of studies about 20-ish years ago done on baths, interestingly. And they found that about a 20 to 30 minute hot bath was very useful, because what happens is an hour and a half before bed, you're warming your body up, but then you take that next hour to cool off. And that does a similar thing to that passive body heating and then cooling. Gel pads. So if you're someone, a lot of times people who are in their going through perimenopause often wake up, and I myself included right now, having hot flashes, night sweats. So gel pads are really wonderful for that. There's all these active heating and cooling devices. I don't work for any of these companies, mind you, but I've had patients have a lot of success and love their Chili Pad, their Bed Jet, 8 Sleep. They're all these, the Ooler, they're all these like pads that you can put on your mattress under your sheet. And there's little like tubes with cold water, or water that can be heated to different temperatures that you would never know is there. And then there's usually a unit that goes under the bed, and that is how you set it. And so some people have it set pretty cold at the beginning of the night and then start to warm up those 2 hours before you're about to get up. So some people really swear by it. I've had some patients say that it really has helped their hot flashes dramatically. If you're someone who gets really hot at night and you don't have any of the like air conditioning that's working, frozen water bottle in front of a fan, simple old school technique, does work really well for some people. Comforters. So a lot of times we're buying one big comforter that works, or we hope that it works for both people if there's more than one person in the bed. What I recommend for people to do, if you have, like my husband and I have very different internal thermostats, is get 2 comforters. It doesn't look so pretty, but get a heavier one. Like I have a little heavier one. My husband has a much lighter one. And then we have the coverlet we put over it in the morning. So it looks like it's just one comforter. So different comforters are really helpful. Like I said, ideal temperature is in about the 60s. And then one other thing, if you do wake up and you're hot and sweaty at night, sweat wicking pajamas are really helpful. And there's really great sweat wicking pajamas and bedding that can really help. So you can go back to sleep a lot faster. You're not waking up feeling like you have to change your clothes and go through all that again. So wind down time. So this is another really important aspect, is that sleep is not an on-off switch. And we often try to treat it that way, and that we're so exhausted, we just want to crash into bed. But the reality is sleep is not an on-off switch. So you need to put an end to the day, because a lot of times if you go to bed with something on your brain in the middle of the night, you might wake up and have it on your brain again, just because you almost took a nap essentially for a few hours. And then you woke up and whatever was on your brain beforehand is going to be there again. So you really have to work on kind of quieting the brain down, whether it's journaling, writing down some of the to-do lists of what you need to do, but really you have to work on getting it out of your brain before bed. So another way to work on kind of quieting the brain before bed are to try and limit screens. So I am a realist, right? I think to tell someone to not use screens 2 hours before bed, I think good luck with that in today's society. If you can, wonderful. I would love for you to do that. But there are things that you can do to help with the screen. So, nothing here is going to be a cure-all for anybody when it comes to screens. The best thing to do is to just limit screens, because all screens have some blue light in them. But there are some things that you can do that might help a little bit more than other things. So one thing, like I was saying, is the blue light blocking glasses. They're not great. The data is kind of mixed on them. But if you find that it's helping a little bit, then by all means, go ahead and use them. Grayscale, so you can put your phone on a grayscale. You can also, like this one, if you sounds so silly to do, but if you're really tied to your phone for bed, maybe allow yourself to use your phone in your bedroom or for bed, but you always have to be standing up outside of bed to use it. I have yet to find one person who actually does it, but it is a really effective technique for some people. So yeah, just stand up if you're going to use your phone. Don't lie down in bed. Find more passive activities with distinct endings. So, right, like things like people tend to watch on their screen, they'll tend to watch like Netflix or YouTube or something that's like nonstop, that doesn't really have like they might binge watch shows, for example. But what tends to happen with that is there's it just auto plays into the next thing, the next thing, and next thing. You can, on many of the things like Netflix, you can actually turn off autoplay. So you'll have a distinct ending and you'll be able to put it down, hopefully, and say to yourself, okay, I need to not have the screen right here, and then work on another passive activity that doesn't rely on a screen. So reading, coloring, listening to an audiobook, doing a meditation. Other things you can think about are like the Vice apps curfew. So if you really are tied to your screen, that's something you can put on your phone, and it will make your phone completely turn off so you can't even use it, except for certain apps that you really are okay with. Dim dark mode is really helpful. So you can and you can also change the light and dark, the text in the backgrounds as well. So like I said, none of these are going to be cures. You're still going to have some blue light. You can also change the color tone to more red from the cool colors. And also, I'm just a firm believer that if you're in bed with your phone in front of your face, that's going to impact your sleep quality, right? If you put it further away, it might not be staring you in the face as much, that maybe, it's not going to be as bad and as strong in your eyes. So consider the screen distance as well. So many people don't have, I'm not saying you should have a TV in your room, but so many people don't have TVs anymore, and all they have is their like little phone or iPad that they're staring at. Now, perfect mattress, sheet, pillow, there is not one size fits all. There just isn't. So if anybody tells you that this is the ideal mattress, this is the ideal pillow that's going to solve all your problems, run away. There are certain things that are better for certain people based on the position that you sleep in, but you do want to think about the age of your pillow, the age of your mattress. I work with a company, full disclosure, I do work with them. I do some media stuff with them, a company called Sleepopolis. And on their website, they have like all these ways for you to figure out what kind of mattress might be an ideal fit for you. Would it be a latex mattress? Would it be a spring mattress? Would it be a hybrid? And what kind of pillow? Like, do you want a firm pillow, a soft pillow based on the sleep position that you're in? So they have a lot of really good info and mattress reviews there for you as well. And there's a lot of different websites out there that have very similar information. Caffeine. So caffeine blocks adenosine. Adenosine is what builds up to make you sleepy. And so one of the strategies with caffeine that some people like to do is to not use caffeine right away when you first get up. For some people, they actually find that they have better bang for their buck with caffeine use if they wait about an hour, hour and a half, because their cortisol levels are so high when you first get up, you're already kind of stimulated to begin with, even though you might be a bit groggy. But if you wait an hour, cortisol levels start to drop, and you might get more out of that coffee about an hour, hour and a half later. So after getting up. So caffeine is really useful for a lot of people. We know people with hypersomnia often use caffeine, use these strategies to help them with wakefulness during the day. One other thing to consider too is the half-life of caffeine can really vary based on the person. We don't know why some people metabolize it faster than others, but also we know that if you smoke, that will actually shorten the half-life, the length of time that the caffeine's in your system, versus if you're taking hormonal birth control, if you're taking or contraceptives, you're taking steroidal hormones, pregnancy, all those things actually make caffeine take longer to leave the body. So the rule of thumb for caffeine is generally about 8 to 12 hours before you're going to bed to start limiting it. But some people, we do have them use it a little bit in the early afternoon to carry over that sleep for them. Another thing, carry over the wakefulness for them. Naps, really great. Some people really love that power nap of 20 to 30 minutes. Why do we say 20, 30 minutes? Because that way you don't get into those deeper stages of sleep and wake up groggy after, say, 45 minutes or an hour. So what we often do with some people is, especially with my patients that have any sort of hypersomnia issues, I will work on napping strategies with them. Sometimes we'll play around and we'll see, well, what time of day would be a better type of nap or timing of nap for you? Would it be earlier? Would it be 1 p.m., 2 p.m.? Would 2 naps a day be better if we did short naps? So it's a little bit of trial and error based on the person. But remember how I was talking about sleep cycles, you go from light sleep or deep sleep, light sleep, REM, and you cycle through. Usually for many people, a sleep cycle is around 90 minutes. So sometimes the magic spot for some people, especially some who have narcolepsy, could be like a 90-minute nap, because you're not waking up in the middle of it and kind of more groggy from it. You're letting a whole sleep cycle finish, and then you might find it to be more refreshing. So naps, think about how it works for you. If it's the time of day, you don't want to do it too close to bedtime. We usually try to limit within 8 hours of bed, but like I said, it's a little trial and error based upon the person and what they're struggling with. And then also coffee naps. I don't recommend this as like a daily strategy, but we used to use it in the hospital with some of our patients who are on shift work. So you have a cup of coffee, you drink it, and it takes about 30 minutes for the coffee to hit your bloodstream. So in that 30 minutes, you take a nap, and then you wake up and you have the benefit of both the coffee and the nap, hence coffee nap. And I've heard some people call it a nappuccino recently. And then also the rule, I'm being mindful of time for questions, the rule of 3 hours. So limit liquids, heavy meals, alcohol, nicotine, and strenuous exercise, all those things within 3 hours of bed, because they all can worsen the quality of the sleep that you have. You can have more awakenings, and you might fall asleep okay with, say, like alcohol, but it's going to cause more awakenings or lighter sleep throughout the night. So, and same thing for nicotine. So you want to really watch that within 3 hours of bed. And same thing with exercise. You can do light exercise, do some stretching, whatever, but anything that's going to warm your body temperature up too much, the whole point is an hour and a half, 2 hours before you want to start cooling off. So be mindful of exercise that you're doing. Try to do it a little earlier in the evening or in the morning. But like I said, I do restorative yoga, some stretching before bed. That's totally fine. And a light snack before bed is usually good for some people. So some people I find have awakenings at night because they've been intermittent fasting, and they're waking up and they're hungry and they don't always really know they're hungry. So a snack that's a little bit of a carb, a healthy carb, low sugar, of a complex carb ideally, and then some sort of a protein is a nice mix for some people to help carry over their feeling, their satiety, so they're not waking up in the middle of the night. And if you have to take pills or any liquids before bed, any medication, whatever it is, try to limit it to 8 ounces max of liquids so that you're not waking up having to use the bathroom. Mouth taping, so really quick. So I've been asked about this a gazillion times recently because of all the press and TikTok trend of mouth taping. If you are someone who snores, pauses in your breathing at night, any choking, gasping, there's any reason to think that there's anything going on with your breathing at night, or you sleep with your mouth open, talk to your doctor. If you're a mouth breather, talk to your doctor first. You probably need a sleep study to rule out something like sleep apnea, for example. If everything has been ruled out and you have your doctor's fine with it, then go ahead, mouth tape. Some people find it's really great, but it is not a treatment for sleep apnea. And I find that more people are using it to just stop snoring, but they're actually worsening their sleep apnea. So definitely talk to your doctor, get anything else that could be causing any of the snoring ruled out before you even start mouth taping. Quiet is another big one. So I always say the room has to be like a quiet, pretty, ideally nice, the place that you want to be, cave. So quiet, dark, comfortable, cool, temperature-wise, like we talked about. So white noise is really helpful for some people. So a white noise machine, if you travel, they make little travel ones now. You can use a phone. There's white noise apps for phones. And then there's headbands with built-in headphones that have white noise. I use those actually on a plane. And then there's all these great earplugs. So you can just get like silicone, like earplugs for swimmers are really good. And then they have the fancy ones like Quiet On, Bose, Sound Pods. There's a whole bunch out there. It just depends how much you want to spend. But I'm a big fan of starting with a white noise machine if you like it. And if you also want to talk to your doctor just to make sure, because there can be issues for some people with using headphones or earplugs routinely. But if they're okay with it, sometimes just start with the cheaper like swimmers ones, because that can be the easiest place to start. And it's a lot less expensive than the $100 plus headphones that people will often get that are noise canceling. And meditation, I have just a few more slides. So meditation is one other thing that I think a lot of people don't think about with sleep. Or the way they think about is that they use it to fall asleep too. Like they use a meditation, like a sleep meditation on like Headspace or Calm to fall asleep too. That's not actually practicing meditation. So if you're someone who gets in bed or in the middle of the night, your brain gets really active, I am a huge fan of using meditation during the day. So it's almost like you're going to the gym and you're practicing weightlifting, and you're starting with just like no weight or a 1 pound weight, and you're just lifting it. And that's like doing a 1-minute meditation. And the whole goal of a meditation is not to focus the whole time. It's about recognizing when your brain goes blah, 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 and starts thinking about other things or judging yourself or thinking this is the dumbest thing ever, whatever it is, and saying, no, not now. Back on task, focusing on the meditation you're listening to, or for me, it's looking out the window, observing and describing what I see on a tree every morning. So when your mind wanders, nope, back on track. So every time that you do this and get back on track, that's the strength training. And so it's not about focusing the whole time. And then if you get better at it, now you try 2 minutes. And it's not about focusing for 2 minutes. It's just about refocusing over those 2 minutes multiple times. That's how you get stronger. So that at night, when you want to go to bed or you wake up in the middle of the night, your brain's going like this, you are now stronger from practicing meditation and letting things go to refocus, that you can let it go a lot faster. Nope, not now. Back on track. Nope, not now. Back on track. It's like when you're doing it at night to fall asleep to, it's like you're falling asleep while strength training. You're not going to get anything out of it. So practice it during the day, and over time, you might notice that it's going to help you at night. And then finally, revenge bedtime procrastination. This was the big one that I see a lot too, is that people just, I called it momsomnia in my book, but it's all the same thing. We just stay up late and we put off going to sleep because we want that time for ourselves to do the things we normally don't have time to do. But then what happens is we end up having poor quality sleep as a result and are sleep deprived. So I'm a fan of using timers to wind yourself, like to say to yourself, okay, wind down time in 20 minutes, to remind yourself of why you need to start turning it down and when you need to start turning it down, and write down your why. Like, I notice I'm less irritable when I get more sleep, when I allow for more time to sleep, when I'm not staying awake watching, binge watching a show on Netflix or whatever it might be. Like I said earlier, you can turn off the autoplay, use the phone when you're standing up. And then my biggest tip for most people is just get an old school alarm clock. Stop using your phone as your alarm clock. So you're lessening the temptation to have it right there. Put it across from your bed. Put the phone across from your bed if you need to use it for emergencies. If you have like a do not disturb list of people who can call, but use an alarm clock as the thing that needs to get you up in the morning so you don't have to look at your clock so much. And then finally, if you've tried some of the basic sleep hygiene stuff, if you're using it for yourself and it's just not enough, talk with your doctors. Or if you're someone who hasn't seen a sleep doctor for yourself, talk with a sleep doctor, right? Talk with someone who really can understand what your specific issues are, and maybe have you have a sleep study. Maybe have you get, if you have, let's say, insomnia, get more specified treatment, like what I would do for example, with insomnia. Find someone who might treat your sleep apnea. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. And it doesn't always mean you have to have a sleep study. I think a lot of people still assume that everyone has to sleep in a sleep lab, but if you're just rolling out, say, sleep apnea, you don't necessarily have to have a sleep study in lab. So don't ignore your sleep problem. You are the expert on you, and go from there. So there's lots. So like I said, sleep hygiene is super important. We tailor it to the specific issues that people are dealing with, like when it comes to naps and eating and bedtime, winding down, and also temperature in your body and how cold to keep the room. But they are things that we all should be thinking of to just try and get the most out of whatever sleep we're getting. And from there, I'll open up to some questions.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Harris. That was wonderful. I could listen to you all day, and I know I engage a lot with you on LinkedIn and Instagram. So we do have a few questions. I will jump right in. Given sodium oxybate has been shown to increase brain amplitude waves when asleep, has there been any research to show that the same duration of sleep on Xyrem can be more restorative than the duration of sleep not on Xyrem?
That's a little bit of an area that's a little outside my area. So but I'm interested in it. I mean, we do know that it does deepen sleep, but I don't know of anything. I'd have to look first, while you're on it versus while you're off.
Okay. You mentioned sleep debt and paying it off over days 1, 2, 3 in the week 1 off model. In high school, we learned that sleep debt can build up and be paid off on a week or 2-week basis, but after a certain point, for example, a month, maybe this can go longer, can be made up. This is complicated. Has the understanding in science changed? And how long can debt sleep? Yeah, okay.
Exactly what you're getting at here. So when it comes to sleep debt, I kind of use that just because the initial sleepiness, you might sleep a little longer in the first few days, but the reality, yes, is that it's always building up. So like if someone loses out an hour every night, here and there, or not every night, if they need 8 hours a night and they're only getting 6 hours, in the middle of the week, they're losing 10 hours of sleep. Good luck making up an extra 10 hours on the weekend. So you'll pay back some of it, but not all of it, that the debt just keeps building up. So yes, you might feel less sleepy after a few days because you've slept more, but that underlying problem is always there. But people tend to get really anxious by that idea of like, how much debt have I built up? I'm never going to pay it back. The best thing you can do is just start today and just work on trying to get as much sleep as you can on a routine basis, and not worry about what you lost, because that's not going to do you any good.
Okay. And then building off of that same question regarding sleep debt, this person is currently pregnant and off meds, and she's sleep deprived in the first semester, and she's trying to figure out how to balance taking meds in the second trimester.
What about that? How long can sleep? I think I wouldn't even worry so much about paying off the sleep debt. It's just, if you feel like you're sleep deprived and you're struggling with it and you want to talk with your doctor about it, definitely. It's it's a cost benefit kind of thing you want to think about in the second trimester for sure. But don't think about how much you've lost over the years.
Okay. I was at a seminar with people with narcolepsy, almost all identified as more of a night owl than an early bird chronotype. Has this been studied?
I don't know about that being studied in particular, but I would agree, like with a lot of the patients I've worked with, there is more of that night owl kind of tendency.
Okay. It seems like sleep hygiene hasn't really been studied in narcolepsy, but in general populations. Is this true?
I wouldn't say it's true, because you think about like CBT for hypersomnia, like some of the strategies are sleep hygiene strategies that are just more tailored to patients with narcolepsy. So we are definitely using it more. I would definitely say we have studied it in narcolepsy patients.
Okay, thank you. Should a person with narcolepsy increase blue light during the day?
I think anybody should be getting more blue light, but I wouldn't say that blue light is going to be the thing that's going to just solve all excessive sleepiness issues. But light is important for so many things, more than just energy. So for mood, all that sort of stuff, it's very important to take to think about your light exposure.
Okay. Would your nap duration recommendation change for people with type 1 narcolepsy if they go into REM sleep in less than 10 minutes?
I don't necessarily think so. It's so interesting how it's really hit or miss with some people. So it's really a little bit of trial and error. I wouldn't. Some people don't even find that naps are helpful. If they go into REM so much, they find that the naps are actually less refreshing than, because they feel like there's so much imagery that's happening. So it's really a little bit of trial and error, 20, 30 minutes, an hour. See if it helps you. If it's not helping you, get rid of it, and let's try a new strategy.
Okay. The next question is related to the trackers. You mentioned that there are a lot of watches, sleep trackers that aren't so accurate. Are there any that you've seen that are more accurate than others? Or do you see any on the horizon that have high accuracy level?
I like the Aura Ring and the Whoop the most. But like I said, they're still not perfect. But I mean, I give it another few years and they're going to be doing great things. So yeah.
Okay, good. Which CBT app would you recommend?
So for insomnia, there's a few out there. So there's Sleepio, that's really good. That one, sometimes you have to be a part of a certain company, or a company that offers it. It varies. But then there's the CBTI Coach app, which is through the VA. That's another really good one. And then there's lots of books out there, like my book is another one. But I really like CBTI Coach and Sleepio the most.
Okay, great. Just as a question regarding narcolepsy, a lot of times people come to us and ask for behavioral sleep specialist, and I a lot of times recommend them to you. But how would somebody go about finding someone that, we've used that society map, but it is hard to find a person who can help them with narcolepsy.
I know. I think the best thing you can do, if you really want someone who really understands narcolepsy, is to find someone who is not just like on the behavioral sleep medicine listserv, or on that listing, but someone who's actually a DBSM like myself. So someone who's board certified, because then you know that they've actually sat down and taken the exam, and it doesn't cover just insomnia, it covers all different areas. So if you're struggling, you can go to that Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine website. And then if you're just still not sure, write to me and I'll send you in the right direction for sure.